What's up, nerd family? Welcome once again to the Poindexter Lounge. My name is Enosh, aka Enosh Fett, and it is good to have you all with me in the lounge today. Now, look, if this is your first time to the lounge, just know that the Poindexter Lounge is a place for nerds. It's a place where you and me and all of our nerd family can get together and talk about the things that we love. Things like TV shows, movies, games, sci-fi, comic books, superheroes, toys, and so much more. And if those are things that get you excited, then please know that you have found the right place and hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell. We would love to have you here. Today is a very special day for me and for the lounge. You all know what a huge Superman fan I am and how much the character has meant to me over my lifetime. And there's a reason for that. And we talk about the comic books a lot. We talk about what shaped my feelings and my opinions about Superman as a character and as a role model growing up even. And today we are very, very blessed. We're going to jump right in. But today we are very blessed and excited to have the one and only Mr. Dan Jurgens in the lounge. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Enosh. How are you?
Dude, I am great. I am excellent, especially that you are here today, man.
Sure. My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Yes. Now, before we jump in, I was telling you a little bit before we started, Superman has always been, and I do want to recognize that you had a huge run on Superman. You've had a big impact with that character. Obviously, you've done so much more, than just Superman. But and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But I just wanted to tell you that Superman, for me, growing up, I grew up without my dad. I was raised by my grandmother, and Superman, excuse me, for me was always kind of the quintessential male role model, right? Like what a man should be, not because of his superpowers, not because of those things. Those things were all cool, but just because of the way he treated people around him and how he reacted to those around him. And so that always stuck with me growing up. And I was always a fan growing up, through my childhood. But it was funny because I didn't really read comic books a lot growing up. I'd grab one off a newsstand every once in a while, and my grandma would buy me one because I would see something cool. But as far as like being a regular collector, I didn't really get into that until I was about 16. And how I got into that was one night. I'll never forget that night. Me and a buddy just got back from being on vacation, and we stopped at a laundromat because we had so much laundry. We stopped at a laundromat, and there was a 24-hour place, kind of like a Walmart, open. And I went and I found the collection of the Death of Superman. Okay. And it had been like the year after it had come out, and I knew that the Death of Superman had happened and everything, but I hadn't really read it. And I remember picking that up and I read it all the way through just in that one setting. And first of all, I was amazed because I had never really thought of comic books as something that would be smart, intelligent, like for adults, right? Everybody people, especially back then, like comic books were kind of like this nerdy thing, whatever. But it really, reading what you guys did with the Death of Superman, it just grabbed me and it inspired me. And of course, then I went off on this adventure for the next few years, man, that I had to get every back issue. I had to go, I went all the way back, to the John Byrne, revamp and everything, and collected all of that stuff. And it was just so inspiring. And it really, I loved seeing Superman portrayed differently than I had even seen him growing up, as just this indestructible, man of might and force. But you guys really crafted a story about Clark.
Right.
And that has stuck with me. And to this day, I have conversations with people who still don't always understand that. And I always point them back to you guys' work. And I'm like, you need to read this. You need to see this. And my son's middle name is Jor-El even.
Nice.
It's just been something that stuck with me. Anybody who knows me knows the Superman is my thing. And so right off the bat, I just want to say thank you for your work and for what you meant to a young version of me growing up and even into my adulthood. So
Very nice of you to say. And, thanks for the kind words. It's always good to know and very gratifying to find out later in life what the effect of our work has been over the years. So that's awesome. Thank you.
you're absolutely welcome. Now I want to get into a few things from your career, and we'll talk about that segment of your career, obviously. But Dan, so that people watching this can get to know you, like how did you get involved in comic books? Your artwork and writing.
Well, it started as a reader. I came in largely because of the live action Batman TV show. If you think back to the 60s, which was on at that time. And, I started watching the show. I had not even picked up a comic book at that point. And then, one warm summer night, I was out walking through my neighborhood and there were a couple of older kids sitting on their front stoops and they had a stack of comic books there. And I went and looked at them. And I said, well, what are these? And lo and behold, Batman was actually in the comic books as well. Well, that's awesome. I'm not limited to watching it 2 nights a week. I can read about him in the comics. And that was my first exposure to comics. And I was really hooked from that moment on, intrigued by the characters, the art, the stories, and everything. And I always retained that interest so that later, by the time I had continued to develop as an artist, I was able to break in and start working with DC. And that's been quite some time ago now.
Yeah, and it's amazing how time passes. I'm going to be 45 next month, and I still I don't feel like I'm 45. I'm still surrounded by toys and comics, and I'm very blessed to have a wife and 3 boys that are very much into the same things that I am. I'm always amazed when I see somebody who can do the things like that you do, like because I'm a musician and I have my own talents and my skill sets. But I'm always amazed when I see people who can draw, and I'm always impressed with writing because I love good writing, and I really feel that you especially I love what you have put out. It always seemed real to me. It's always seemed very just well thought out and done. Everybody's got a different style, and I appreciate everybody's style, but I think for you especially, you've had a style all your own that I think has set kind of the benchmark for me at least, and I know many others for what those characters should look like.
Oh, great. Thanks. And it helps a great deal to be both a writer and artist. And I think it makes, even if I'm writing for another artist, it makes that level of communication easier. And if I'm drawing for someone else, it's the same thing because I'm able to bridge both disciplines, and that helps a great deal.
Yeah. Now you've worked on Superman, obviously. You've worked on Captain America, Spider-Man. You're working on Batman Beyond. You've worked on Thor, but you spent a long time on Superman.
Mm-hmm.
A good part of your career. What is it about Superman that inspires you the most? I mean, what is it about that character that really inspired you to write some of those stories that you wrote and to see that in him? Because like I said earlier, a lot of the Superman stories, most of the Superman stories that came before that were all just about Superman. Superman was the main focus. Clark was kind of sidelined. The Christopher Reeve movies obviously, put him in this position of kind of just being the facade, not really the real person. But one of the things that really stands out in your time there is the development of Clark Kent. And
well, and I think for me and I think the others working on the books at the same time is that we in many ways saw him as Clark first and Superman second. It's important to recognize that everyone talks about Superman being from Krypton, which is entirely true. But as we worked on the character, he was not raised there. He was raised human on Earth by human parents. And I think that's what forms his character. And I think part of what I find so interesting about Superman is that desire of his to be human and associate with humanity. And I think his relationship with Lois sort of symbolizes that as much as anything, he's looking to live a normal life. And also, so then when he becomes Superman, when he puts on the cape, he's not out there telling people what to do. It is, he leads by quiet example. And one of the things that has always attracted me to the character is that notion of quiet leadership, where I don't see Superman as necessarily making the big speech. It's more like his style is, if I do the right thing, it will inspire others to do the right thing. So he's about integrity and that notion that we should all live life a certain way. And I think those are the things that embody Superman and why I've always been attracted to him.
Especially nowadays. I mean, I think that as people have gotten, a lot of times people get cynical about
Mm-hmm.
things, and Superman harkens back to a time of a different maybe set of values or a different age, and it's good to see the character, I think, develop over time. I run into a lot of Superman fans. I'm part of like two fandoms, Dan, that I feel like that everybody, fans of anything can be, extreme on anything. But I find, like, I'm a Star Wars fan and I'm a Superman fan, and those are like my life passions as far as my fandoms. And I talk to a lot of Superman fans, and they all seem to have a very different view on who Superman should be.
Hmm.
And I notice this especially nowadays. There's some people who want to harken back to, the very early days, or the Christopher Reeve version of Superman, with just kind of this pristine, never makes a mistake kind of thing. What I enjoyed about yours was I really felt that it, like, even though now that it's hard to believe that, you guys were working on that, over 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago, but it still stands true today, that I think we can learn how to deal with our mistakes as we go along. That Superman didn't always have all the answers, but like you said, he was getting through life just like everybody else.
Right. Well, and I think that is an important aspect of Superman, because I don't know that I believe in the perfect person, and therefore I would not believe that Superman could
Yeah.
be perfect. And I think certainly what we have seen is this idea that young Clark would have had to have made some mistakes, right? And he learned from that. And I think that's definitely what makes him a more well-rounded and more interesting sort of character. And I think it also allows us to get to the point where we can say Superman is not one who gets seduced by the dark side. So to use the Star Wars comparison a little bit,
Hmm.
you know, I find it fascinating that there seems to be this like pent up desire to always see Superman go bad. I've
Yeah.
always absolutely been fascinated, but it's like, why? And I think the why is because people just can't believe someone can be good. And some of that is because it goes back to what I often say, which is Batman is who we are, but Superman is who we should aspire to be.
Hmm.
And it's almost like people have such a hard time believing that someone could act that way and
Sure.
actually be a decent human being, that they always want to see the Superman goes bad, goes dark, goes evil sort of story, which to me kind of defeats the purpose of Superman a little bit, but there it is. So, I think that this idea that Clark is the core of Superman, that's where his sense of humanity comes from, and that's where his respect for humanity comes from, is extremely important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I enjoy things like, like, even we've been like really involved with the Snyder Cut movement, trying to get Zack Snyder's, vision finally seen, and whatnot. And I guess one of the things that I like about that story, because like you said, there are a lot of these evil Superman stories, that it's just like him evil just for almost the sake of being evil.
Mm-hmm.
What I look for, like, in a story like that is, okay, why would Superman make certain decisions? if that were the case, and what is it that brings him back? Like even if we're tempted by the dark side, what is it that brings us back to see that? And I've always seen Lois as being that thing that grounds him, in our world, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
and that's, I mean, but that's the great thing about Superman, I think, is that everybody can see a little bit, I think, of themselves, or like you said, what they inspire to be, because that was what I saw in Superman, growing up, was what, like I said, a man should be to his family, to his friends, and whatnot. And so, no,
Sure.
that
And I think that when I introduced Jon Kent here a couple of years ago,
yeah,
then takes that to that next step, because ostensibly we could say that Batman, even though he didn't know about Damian, to me the world's greatest detective would have known about Damian. But
yeah,
then you say, well, was Batman a deadbeat dad? And I'm not saying that he was, but he was certainly an absent father.
mhm,
Whereas then Superman becomes sort of the instant counterpoint to that. Like, no, he has been there since day one, and it's the only place he ever could be, is right there. So,
yeah,
and I think, again, that addresses very much who he is and why he is the way he is. So that's where, the addition of Jon Kent just doesn't become another character in the tapestry of Superman. It becomes a much deeper explanation of who Superman is and who Clark and Lois are.
yeah. I really appreciate the fact that you introduced John Kent, because it felt like, to me, the older I've gotten, it felt, because when you guys brought that Superman back, and that's how I kind of felt about it a lot, was you were bringing back that Superman that I had connected with, back in the 90s, and read all those back issues and everything and followed along through, and to see him be a dad. Now that I've got a 16-year-old, I've got a 19-year-old stepson and a 15-year-old stepson, as far as I'm concerned. But as when I became a dad, that was like the most important thing to me,
Mm-hmm.
in the world, especially not having a dad, growing up.
Sure.
And so to read about Superman having to make some of those decisions, and raise a son kind of at the same time, now that here I was kind of going through those same things, it's amazing how even a comic book character like that can tap into who you are, where you're at in your life,
Yeah,
as you
of
follow
course.
these characters. And the introduction of Jonathan Kent. I mean, what was that conversation like when you guys decided, hey, there's Lois, there's Clark, we're going to bring them back, they're going to have a child.
Well, first of all, just to set things up a little bit, part of it had been the idea, and you alluded to this earlier, the Superman that people would have read about, through the 90s and the 2000s, first 10 years of the decade anyway, had pretty much gone away. We had done the New 52, and you had a Superman who was no longer married to Lois Lane,
Yeah.
um, who either had or had not ever fought Doomsday and died, depending on who you asked, things like that.
Yeah.
And what happened is, at that point, we lost context for who the character was. I think that fans, some liked the relationship with Wonder Woman, others didn't. But the important thing is that all of a sudden, his past was no longer intact, and the character lost context. Batman's past was still intact. Green Lantern's was, but Superman's wasn't. So that became something of a problem, and they had asked me to kind of go in, repair some of that, bring back the old Superman, and that's what we did. But part of this was this idea that I pitched to them. Well, what if we advance Clark and Lois to the next stage where they have a child? And especially since they're on a world where Superman no longer had powers, is there anything we can do with that and make it dramatic and make it fun? And as I said earlier, more importantly, add to the legend of who Superman is. So as I said, John contributes directly to our understanding of who the characters of Clark and Lois are. At the same time, what I said is, he can sort of represent the future for DC somehow. And I, at that time, didn't know necessarily what that would be or exactly how it would play out. I didn't see him being, say, 16, 17 years old so soon. But I said, there is a future there. There's something to build on down the road. So that's really how I first set it up and first pitched it.
Now, as a dad yourself, did that play as you were writing that character, as you were, developing that character? Did some of your experience as a dad, obviously, and maybe going through what you went through, did that play somewhat into how you set up some of those dynamics?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. It's somewhat a chicken and egg argument because someone will say, did some of your own experiences as a child come into it? It's like, yes, as did my experiences as an adult and as a parent. So I think, so often what we write and what we build as story is in many ways, it exemplifies the sum of who we are as people. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there was a lot of it that came from, again, whether I was a kid or a parent that went into it and how we started to build that.
Yeah, that's cool. So going back a little bit, because we talked about Jonathan Kent and how you brought that back there during the time that you all started to talk about killing Superman. How does that conversation come up? How do you start to think, here's this character that's been around for so long, means so much to DC Comics. What is the feeling in the room when you're actually having that discussion?
Well, I think, I think this is rather well known that originally we were going to be building out a story that would lead to the wedding of Superman and Lois. And part of what happened is at that time, the Lois and Clark TV show was on, and they wanted us to hold off on the wedding because they eventually were going to build to that themselves. So we needed another story. We had kicked around the concept of other stories that would touch on the death of Superman somehow at previous meetings. But we never had a story for it. We never had the why for it. And on this one, even as it came up in the room, what we really focused on is doing it so that we could say something about Superman. And in many respects, the story was, so if we think of the death of Superman that we did, we had the death of Superman, then we had Funeral for a Friend, and after that, Reign of the Superman. But I think a lot of the reason for doing the story was the Funeral for a Friend storyline, where we talked about, what would Superman's funeral would be like? Who would be there? How would the other heroes respond? How would Earth respond? How would the president respond? What would happen in a world where there was no Superman? And what became important to us is, just as we all see in our own personal life, when someone dies, that's when we really start to consider what that person meant to us. With the death of Superman, we could really start to consider Superman's meaning to the world in the eyes of the DC universe. What became magic is that it got so much press that a lot of that was reflected in the real world at that time, because a number of columnists across the country wrote things based on, what does it mean that they're taking Superman away? Who are we now without a Superman? And they were writing about the same things we wrote about in fiction, only they were doing it in the context of reality. And they'd even say, is Superman old-fashioned? Is that why we've lost him? And to that, my response has always been, if Superman is old-fashioned, if you're saying truth, justice, and the American way, and I'll use that phrase, for whatever reason is old-fashioned, then that's a problem with us that we have to fix, not that Superman has to be fixed for. So that's what we wanted to focus on, is what is the world without Superman? What is it like when Ma and Pa Kent are watching their son die on TV as Superman, but they can't tell anyone that it's their son Clark, and I think the emotional beats of character is what we all got invested in. And from that came the story.
Yeah. And that's, you hit on that so well, because that's what I felt reading it, was to be able to reflect on this character, because when I first read it, I was about 16 or 17 years old, like I said, and I had always loved Superman, but my Superman had always been either the Christopher Reeve movies, the occasional comic book here or there that really, didn't have an ongoing story to it, or, watching Super Friends cartoons or something like that. Uh, and you helped me reflect on what Superman meant to me. And then it was something that I wanted to ongoingly know more about him,
Sure.
you know, which actually, hits on something, because you guys did something back then that, uh, really wasn't, something. I mean, you guys had all these, titles, all these
Mm-hmm.
different titles were coming out monthly, and you touched on like Lois and Clark, for example, where there was a lot of, it seemed, similarities between what you guys were doing in the comics and some things that they were doing on the show. But you guys really made a weekly, episodic story that was going on, with the triangles. You could jump in, you were, and you could find your way through that. And what I loved was you had an overarching story, but yet each title had their own stories. Was
Right.
that difficult? I mean, how difficult was that to do, where you had all these different writers trying to tell their own stories in the midst of your greater story?
It was difficult to do, yes. But I think we all recognized the value in it, in that we could see that we were greater than the sum of our parts.
Yeah.
And that, when we would embark on these periods where all four books would combine, we'd always know that eventually we would get out of it and be able to get back to doing our own stories again for a couple of months. But the fans responded so well, and it allowed us, people will ask, just like you did, was it difficult? Well, it's important to note that there were always advantages to it as well. And it allowed us, as one of the advantages, to build out the supporting cast in such a way that I think really helped the books as well. So we could build out Perry White storylines,
Yeah.
and Lois storylines, and Jimmy storylines, and develop characters beyond that, and other heroes, whether it was, Gangbuster or Agent Liberty or whomever, and others, that we made the world of Superman and the world of Metropolis come alive in a way that, no one has done since. And
Yeah.
all the artists, for example, we all had an artistic Bible. We all drew the Daily Planet building the same way. And one of the things that would frustrate me later is I'd be asked to step in and do something on an issue of Superman. And if there were three different artists, it meant there were three different Daily Planets. And I'd say, why can't you just get on the same page? It takes work, it takes coordination, but it takes commitment from the creative teams to understand that the bigger story is the advantage that you get. And that's what pulls readers in.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, because I thought that, because I remember, reading it week to week, and I would, you'd look at all these different names and things and people working on it, and I would just think, man, it's got to take a lot of work to centralize all that and get that together. But how rewarding did it have to be to see your story lay out the way it did? And like you said, it was great, because I knew that if I picked up, Man of Steel, it had its side cast of characters, that you had these ongoing stories. If I picked up Adventures, it had their side cast of characters. If I picked up, Superman or Action Comics, it all had that, and I could look forward to that monthly. But at the same time, you still had that main story going, and
Right.
and that was great. And like you said, it's something that I feel that missing nowadays, where it's like that excitement every week to just go back and see what new thing was happening with our friends, kind of in that world. That was
Well, I agree. I mean, I miss that as a reader as well. And one of the problems is publishers now change out creative teams. It feels like every 6 months, and artists often ask me, why do writers get so much credit? And I'll say, well, it's because very few. To build an identity as an artist on a title, you have to be there, I think, 2 years. And right now, for an artist to do a stint on a book that is actually 2 years long is extremely rare. And it is because things are relaunched and rebuilt and just, put out there again and again and again with new creative teams so much that you lose momentum. And it's a very different industry that way now. And whereas for us, we had a really committed group of creators that were able to constantly build on what we had done the month before and therefore the year before, and kind of guide these characters along. And then, yes, eventually you have to change those people out as well, because people want something a little more fresh. But, I think now we've veered too far the other way.
Sure. No, I agree that you're preaching to the choir here as a fan and as someone who has enjoyed that. So I love what you said about Funeral for a Friend, because I do think that it's a lot of times maybe overlooked as just kind of like that middle section of that story.
Right.
And it's just like, kind of like, well, we had to go through this to kind of get to the Reign of the Supermen, but also Reign of the Superman. I mean, what a great story. I mean, bringing characters that you created back, like Hank Headshaw, and those reveals and everything. I not too long ago we did a giveaway, and I put a collection together of all those stories, of the entire
Okay.
story, and I gave it away to. We ended up giving it to a young man, RJ. He's on some of our streams every once in a while, and his dad is a huge Superman fan, and I guess him and his dad have like sat and read it and together, and like to hear him talk to me about it for the first time, something that I read, so long ago, and have that same experience. I think it's a real testament to the fact that what you guys did back then was relevant, and it's still very relevant today, and needed. It's such a great story. It's such a well-crafted story. You should be very proud of that.
Well, I am, and I think we're all proud of that, and the entire, storyline, starting with Death of all the way through Reign of the Superman. And I think the big thing for us is that, because when we made the decision to kill Superman, and then DC made the decision to stop publishing the Superman books for a while, that was great for us. It was great because it gave us a break.
Sure.
But at that time, when we set all of that up, we had no idea how we were going to bring Superman back. We had a vague idea of when it would happen, but even that wasn't totally defined, and we did not know how. So that eventually Death of Superman becomes this big, big thing that is just getting all the attention. And we got together, and our editor at the time, Mike Carlin, said, we have to come up with something really good because the whole world is watching.
Yeah.
We had 4 different creative teams, all of whom had their own ideas for how Superman might come back. And we weren't in agreement on it. We were just kind of split up. And at one point, Louise Simonson, who was writing Man of Steel at the time, said, oh, it's just too bad we can't all do our own ideas somehow. And, that's then where this discussion started of, well, can we? Is there anything there? And it wasn't then anything like 4 characters claiming to be Superman. But that's where we started to have that discussion. And that's where the story slowly came along. And it was, John Bogdanoff in particular was very passionate with this idea of John Henry Irons and Steel. And Carl Kiesel and Tom Grummett were all over this concept of Superboy. And, I said, well, what if one of them is a bad guy? And if so, who would it be? And I don't know, maybe this Hank Henshaw guy, and that's how the story came together. But I think what we were feeling is, and this was in the early days of stuff being online, is so many people saying things like, well, I know how he's coming back. And I even saw a post on a message board that said something like, I know somebody who knows somebody, and I know exactly how he's coming back because I've talked to them and they know one of the creators. And we didn't know. I mean, at that point, we did not know. So when we were able to come back with Adventures 500, and you had the 4 different endings that showed 4 different Supermen, that blew people away. And it was, even then, it can be so hard in comics to truly surprise readers
Yeah.
and throw them that curveball that they never saw coming. That was, to me, this ultimate triumph that we got. And then we had the debate over which of the four is real, if any, and that kind of thing. And that was magic. And that just carried everything on to this great conclusion. And I still say that to this day, because so many people wanted to label the death of Superman as a publicity stunt, which it wasn't. We were only ever trying to tell a good story about Superman. That is it. We thought, yeah, this will maybe sell some more, but we couldn't foresee what it would do. But we were so labeled with that. I don't think the story has ever gotten the credit it deserves as being a really effing good comic book story, and has never gotten the recognition it should have gotten, because that's what it was.
Well, and I'm really glad that you say that, because I've been a big proponent, especially because of the stuff that I'm fans of, and we talk about a lot of different things here on the channel, and we have put panels together and we've had people. But one of the things that I've started to realize is, and maybe this was true back then, but I was just I wasn't old enough. We didn't have the internet like we have now, where everybody's an expert. Maybe they were writing letters back then. I don't know. But it's interesting to me because I feel like people don't want to be told a story anymore. They feel like they know these characters enough that, like, I know, like you said, I know what Superman would do. I know how this would happen. I know how that would happen. And I think sometimes we just have to let the people who are in creative control have that ability to tell us a story and come at it from that angle of, like, being kids again, like where we weren't angry about how Superman came back, or angry about something in Star Wars that we didn't like this way or that way, and just take it maybe for what it doesn't mean we have to like it, but to accept it and find out why, dig a little deeper maybe into those characters.
Yeah, and I think also there's it's one thing to try and tell a really good, entertaining story, and another thing to continually try to be making a political point of some kind. And there's a lot of that going on now too.
Yeah.
That sometimes you just let the characters breathe and be who they are, and there's less of that, which is unfortunate, I think. And I do believe that somewhat along the lines of what you might be saying, there might be a little bit too much contact between creators and readers. And I bounce back and forth on that a lot, so it's not like I'm totally convinced, but I do sense that at times. And a lot of that now is being driven so much by social media. So and I think that's, I've had more conversations in the last couple of years where I'm told that people want something because that's what is seen on social media, rather than writing what your convictions are as a writer that are true to the character, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I sometimes think we have a little too much contact.
Yeah. And I just, I agree with you. I don't feel that storyline, that space and time gets enough appreciation for that. And look, people have tried to retell that story in different ways. And, some are better than others, but I don't think anybody has really captured what you guys did during that time, the way that you did it, I don't know if it's, I remember hearing, a long time ago that, like a story like, Watchmen was unfilmable, right? Like I've thought many times, like, what it would take to actually see that story done well, whether it be live action or animation or whatever. And it just doesn't seem like it's captured or sparked the same way that it felt reading it directly from you guys.
Yeah, different attempts have touched on it fairly well. The last two animated movies did really, I think they did a really nice job of it. And it's not the same. It would be very, very hard to make it the same. Batman versus Superman, obviously we had Doomsday, and that touched on some of the elements as well, and did so very, very nicely. But yeah, I don't know that we've, and maybe it's impossible to do, I should say that I don't know if we've yet seen the story that puts it all together the way we did. And, by the same token, obviously Marvel has been able to do that with a lot of the Thanos stuff. And I've always wondered, well, could they do it? Could they ever do that with the Galactus trilogy? The first appearance of Galactus, Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four, 48 through 50, I think, and maybe things are just too hard to move into different mediums. That's entirely possible.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. But I tell you what, I've sure enjoyed seeing elements of your stories, pop up in different mediums. I got to say this: you made my day a few weeks ago, and I'll share this. I've been having this argument with people for a long time. As somebody who was a huge fan of what you gave us in the long-haired Superman, the black suit Superman, whatnot. You speaking of social media, you posted this a while back about the new figure coming out from Mafex, and I love the fact that you said they got the hair right too, long but not a mullet.
Yes.
Can you please set the record straight, sir, on this mullet situation? I keep trying to nail this down. I don't know why people say this. I don't know why people do this. Let's hear from the man himself.
When I was drawing that stuff, I never thought of it as a mullet. And now, granted, both Tom and John, Grummett and Bogdanov, drew the hair longer than I did, and they gave Clark a ponytail. And I never once drew Clark with the ponytail. I just gave him loose, longer hair that would kind of tuck into the collar a little bit in back with some overlap. I just saw it as Superman with longer hair. Never a sculpted, business in the front, party in the back mullet. I never did. And as we drew it, and we'd even say, let's give him some longer hair here. No one ever wrote on the border notes, make it a mullet. It wasn't there, and we never used that terminology. So to this day, I still resist that. Longer hair, yes. Mullet, no.
Yeah, and I don't know why I've had so many interesting conversations with people. Oh yeah, mullet Superman, and I'm like, you don't know what a mullet is.
Right.
Sometimes people just have long hair, and I had long hair as a musician, man. When I turned 16, 17, right during that time that I discovered your work, I started growing out my hair because that's when I started my first band. And actually I had a situation where when I finally got it cut to get it trimmed, I think my ex-girlfriend set me up because I was getting it trimmed and the lady gave me a mullet and I was like, nah, I'm good. No, I don't want that. But I appreciate it so much because I've had that conversation with so many people. And then to hear it, to read you say that, I was just like, yes.
Can we consider me an expert?
Yes, I definitely consider you the expert.
Okay.
I consider you the expert. So you, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here definitively from Dan himself. Not a mullet. Not a mullet. No. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, and man, there's so many things I could touch on with you. But let's talk about what you can we just touch on Booster Gold for just a second because I think that Booster Gold is such a relevant character to today. I saw another interview that you did talking about like his relevance today, that like he would be like this day and time, especially with social media and everything. Like it seems to fit right in there. And so you created Booster Gold. Can you talk to us a little bit about Booster Gold?
Yeah, and Booster was created to be something of a reflection of media at that time. And by at that time, we're talking 1985.
Yeah.
A superhero who is playing kind of the promotional game, at that time it wasn't social media, but just the media game, building his Q rating and things like that, is definitely more topical today than it would have been even then. So yes, I continue to maintain that there is a place for Booster, that he fits this world of right now just perfectly, that yes, he would have all the social media accounts, he would have a GoFundMe page or a Patreon account, sort of dedicated to him. He would raise funds that way. he would build his brand that way. He would be a social media influencer that way. And that's what we are touching on the new Blue and Gold series with Booster and Blue Beetle, that we are hitting the world as it is right now. And the way I think that heroes would respond, because we have now athletes, college athletes doing that same thing. We have entertainers doing that same thing. This is how it would work. They would live stream their adventures, and that's what we're doing in Blue and Gold, because right now, that's how it would be.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And Booster Gold was somebody that when I was introduced to him, I was like, this guy, I loved his personality. I loved his humor. I loved the way that he would come in, and one of my favorite shots is when Booster's trying to tell him about Doomsday, and Superman's got him by the collar. It is, it's just like, what's going on here? Trying to get a handle on that. Like you said, he's kind of out there, but I definitely
not only that, but in that scene, Superman says, "What's going on?" And Booster says, "Oh, it's like Doomsday is here." Booster Gold named Doomsday, and that's what people have to remember, is because it's not like Doomsday ever crawled out of the hole and said, "I am Doomsday." He had to get named by someone, and that's where it came from.
No, that's great, man. You have created so many wonderful characters. Like I said, I mean, given the opportunity, we could sit here all day and just talk about your accolades. But tell everybody what you're working on now. I know that you're working on Batman Beyond and some other things. Can you talk a little bit about what you're working on now?
Batman Beyond, unfortunately, has come to an end as DC has cut back some of its line, but that's been replaced by Blue and Gold, which is Booster and Blue Beetle.
Okay.
Also drawing an issue of that right now, and have also just gotten done drawing an issue of X-Men Legends at Marvel. So doing a little more art now than I had been in the last few years, which is nice to get back to the board.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, hey everybody, I will just tell you, you can check out Dan. He's got a great website, danjurgens.com. The link will be down in the description below. And of course you can find him on social media. That's where I found him. I got to tell you, man, a buddy of mine who's got a channel called Nerdy in Many Ways. His name's Dawson. He made a comment about you one day, and about you basically just kind of like what you said, like being an expert on something, because you had said something, and he tagged me in this tweet and said, "Hey, Dan Jurgens said this. I think he's kind of an expert." And it's ironic that you said that, because I said, and he tagged me and said, "Right, Enosh?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Okay.
And from that, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Dan and just see if we can get him on the channel. And that's the day that I tweeted to you. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. And like I said, I feel like we just scratched the surface. Maybe later on we'll have to have you back and talk about new things that you're working on. And I hope that you had a good time here with us today. And
absolutely.
Hey, man, thank you again. Thank you for what you've meant to comics, both DC, Marvel. We kind of have our little war here, because I like Marvel, but I'm a DC guy through and through, man. I'm all in, man, and so and that's okay. But I appreciate what you have brought to the table for everyone. And so,
very nice of you to say. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. So, guys, like I always say, you know what? Don't let anybody tell you that your fandom doesn't matter, and don't tell anybody that their fandom doesn't matter either. But seek to have good conversations, even stuff that you disagree about, And hey, if you come to a standstill about something like Superman having a mullet, bring in the expert, and then it's done. But ladies and gentlemen, until next time, my name is Enosh, aka Enosh Fett, along with Dan Jurgens, saying, hey, stay nerdy and keep looking up in the air, because you never know if you just might see a streak of blue and gold and red, or you know what, maybe a cool long-haired guy in a black suit. All right,
there you go.
Until next time, bye-bye.